Good evening, folks. As you said, my name is Trevor McCarthy, the Kilmallock Medieval Combat Society. Today is going to be a little different for me, as I'm normally accustomed to, with my fellow members, beating the living daylights out of him. So today I'm just going to talk. There'll be no fighting. You're all welcome to the Dominican Priory that we have here. It's a 13th century priory. Well, it was founded in the 13th century. The current building that we have here would not have been the original buildings that stood on this site. It was donated to or purchased by the Dominicans in the year 1291 from a local Burgess owner by the name of John Blewett. I'm sure there's still some Blewetts resident in Kilmallock, so it's an old name. So the Dominicans set up their very basic priory here, which consisted not of the building as we see today. It would have been a very small settlement. They would have had a small stone chapel, some wooden buildings, but it was a very uncertain beginning because almost immediately the Bishop of Limerick, who was the feudal lord of Kilmallock at the time, he owned the joint, he ran the place, he collected the taxes. He sent his soldiers and basically kicked the Dominicans out because he felt that he was the owner of the land and not this man, John Blewett. The Dominicans, in, as I said, 1291, they appealed to the Lord Justiciar of Ireland, who appealed on their behalf to the King of England. If any of you have seen the film Braveheart, the English king there, King Edward I, Longshanks, that was the king. Not as fictitious as the character in the film, but same king. He found on behalf of the Dominicans, and lo and behold, they were given their land back and they moved into the site almost immediately. So they rebuilt their buildings at the time. I like to think that the priory as it is, it grew and it fell with the fortunes of the town, and it was tied very closely with the local land magnates, the Fitzgibbons, who were known as the White Knights. They received their knighthood in 1333, it is said, at the Battle of Halidon Hill. And they were the local owners, and they became patrons of the building. And as they grew in stature and became more important to the Earls of Desmond, they donated money, because in medieval times, the more money you donated, friars would pray on your behalf, and you basically bought your way into heaven, or so it went. So we have generations of the White Knights buried here, indeed, in the high altar, just as you see in the main church. We're situated today in the cloister, which is probably a later edition, probably a 14th century edition. So the building was probably here about 100 years before this area was actually enclosed. And it was for the monks to you know, they thought, they prayed, basically kept to themselves during their day. The buildings behind me are a 15th, if not a 16th century edition. And again, as Kilmallock became much more powerful, it was one of the most powerful towns in Munster, it was the crossroads of Munster. As it became more powerful and more wealthy, more money poured in, it became a very important commercial centre for the Earls of Desmond, and as they got more money, they donated more money, and they built great extensions to their priory, so they could live in comfort, as you see. The tower, the bell tower, as we see here, it's not, even though this is a Dominican priory, it isn't of Dominican design. Maybe it was built in the 15th century, maybe because of the fashion of the time they built it to a Franciscan design. So you've probably heard of the Franciscan monks and monasteries around the country. This is actually a Franciscan design bell tower. The priory itself, it was very important, as I say. The Dominicans ran it. They were famous for brewing beer. So I'm pretty sure they had a great time here for quite a while. It is known that there were 2 mills on the river here to help brew their beer, and they had the 12 acres of land around here, so they probably had the 20 or so monks that were here probably had a great time. As the fortunes of the Earls of Desmond began to wane in the 16th century, so too did that of Kilmallock, and as a result that of the Dominican Priory here. With the Desmond rebellions of the 1570s, Kilmallock was attacked and burned. So too was the monastery. There were some friars killed, it's recorded. And even after the Earls of Desmond, Dominicans still stayed here. Even after the Reformation in England, you all probably have heard of King Henry VIII dissolving the monasteries and taking all the wealth. That happened in England. It happened here in Ireland too, but not on such a scale. A lot of monasteries still stayed Catholic. Even the Earls of Desmond were Catholic. The Earls of Ormond became Protestant, but many of the other great powerful families stayed Catholic. So their great monasteries and such stayed Catholic too. But as English government took more control, they imposed the religion, and by the 1640s, when we have the Cromwellian Wars, and you're all familiar with Cromwell and his deeds in Ireland, one of his commanders, General Lord Inchiquin, who was a very important commander on his side, actually attacked Kilmallock because it was such a strategic importance. His first attack didn't breach the walls, but what he did do was take the monastery. As you know, it's outside the town walls, and unfortunately, before the monks could escape, 2 of them were butchered just behind us here in the main church. The second time, he took it, burned it, and it was left as basically as a shell. Again, by the 1690s, even further on, when you have the Williamite Wars, there were still Dominicans here in a much smaller presence. They were still very, very important, but the building itself was probably falling into disrepair. The beautiful stone-carved windows we have here were probably being robbed for the building of local small houses, but they were still here in a small capacity. But unfortunately, as the centuries went on and Kilmallock's importance waned, they left and never came back. So I like to think that we're left here with an amazing piece of architecture, and it is truly wonderful. We have the tombs of the White Knights, who were very, very important landowners at the time, and we have generations of them choosing to be buried here because of such significance, the town. So that's just basically a very, very quick history, folks. Thank you for listening. Really appreciate it. Enjoy your evening.